Good morning, everyone. Welcome back on this cloudy here in Connecticut Wednesday morning. Delighted to see everybody again to continue our dive into excellent leadership. My name is David Severance. Glad to have you back with me. I'm going to move forward in our conversation a little bit. For those of you who've been with us the last 4 weeks, you know we've been focusing on performance management. Performance management is an extremely important piece of the leadership puzzle. It's an extremely important skill to be able to master over time. That is, to have the right conversations in the right way with staff over time that helps motivate and ensure their greatest contribution to the team is really important. So one of the things that's important in thinking about performance management conversations is that the results of the conversation are not just due to what it is you want to say or how it is you say it in the moment, but also it's a function of the quality of the relationship in the first place. By that, I mean, if you have a strong relationship with somebody, you're probably more likely to give honest and open feedback and can trust that it can be heard and perhaps acted on in a way that really works. If your relationship is weaker with the individual, chances are, no matter how you say it, no matter how you frame the conversation, you might not get the result you're looking for. And so it brings up the question for all of us, how do we create strong enough relationships so that we can have the open and honest, transparent conversations that we need to have at one time or another? So let me ask you, put in the chat box, how many of you sometimes struggle with developing the kind of relationships that you think you need to have with the people on your team? Put a yes into the chat box if you've run into that. I see sometimes, some yeses, sometimes. So let me ask you this question. How many people on your team would you rate your relationship with them as a 10 out of 10? All of them, some of them, none of them? And a related question, maybe a tougher question, is how many of them do you believe, or are you confident, would name their relationship with you as a 10 out of 10? Because if you think about it, first of all, there's the difference in how we experience the relationship and how they experience the relationship, right? There could be a huge gap there, and sometimes we're just not seeing something that's there. Secondly, if we think about how they experience the relationship, that's going to have a huge impact on how they hear whatever it is we have to say in any performance management conversation, right? By nature, a performance management conversation is a very personal one. By nature, it involves what's going well, what's not going well. And if we can't have relationships with people where we can have good conversations like those when we need them, essentially we're leaving money on the table, right? If you don't have a 10 out of 10 with everybody on your team, there's some kind of a loss factor in there. Could be small, could be medium, could be large. But no matter what, it's something that's affecting the business. And so if you're working with your staff and you're thinking about how can I develop good relationships with people so that I can have great conversations over time whenever I need to, that's something you can think about on the people side of the business. So my hope for you today is to consider this thought about relationship and how important it is for you to become really skillful at this concept of relationship. So let me pull up a slide deck. I'll share a couple of thoughts for you on relationship. This is going to be a little philosophical. And then we're going to end with a couple more tactical steps that you can take building on what we talk about today. So I'm going to ask you to think a little bit freely as I go through the first slides here and think about this thing we call relationships. So let me pull this up. Okay. So making working relationships work. I want to start with this very important aspect of this, which is simply that your business is nothing more than a set of relationships. That is, you accumulate relationships over time with employees, with clients, with vendors, with other agents, lots of people you come across in your life, and somehow they touch your business. But really what your business is nothing more than a set of relationships that you manage. Fair enough? It's simply a set of relationships that you've accumulated over time that you manage in whatever way you manage. And the way in which you manage those relationships translates into value being generated or contributed in some way or not. And so what we want to do today is think a little bit, take a step back from the day-to-day stuff of the business and ask yourself some basic questions about what is the nature of the relationships you have with other people and how would you assess the quality of them? Is it a 10 out of 10? Is it an 8 out of 10? Is it 4 out of 10? And how comfortable am I with wherever that relationship is? And we're going to focus on this over the next 4 conversations. So we're going to have enough time to think through how it is that you relate with others and how that might be affecting your success in business. So it starts with this fundamental question, probably one that you don't think about too often. Maybe you do, I don't know. But you should understand that leadership is not just about action. Leadership is also about contemplation, reflection, mental clarity. And so I want to challenge you to spend a little time thinking during this call and after today about this question. What is relationship? What does it mean to you? How do you define relationship? How do you commit yourself to relationships? What kind of relationships do you commit yourself to? What kind of relationships do you ignore? How much information do you feel is necessary or right or good to share in a relationship? How willing are you to work hard towards contributing to a relationship? There's so many aspects to what relationship is and how you feel about it. And the point is, those of you who are running a business are always, I'm just setting my clock here. All of you are running a business are acting in relationships all the time out of how you see relationships, but you may not have spent a lot of time clarifying what that is. So let's start with a basic definition. If I ask you, what is relationship? What would you say? Would you have a clear answer to me? Well, to me, relationship is X. For today's purposes, here's a simple statement we might use for relationships. An ongoing mutual willingness to engage with another with valued benefits for each. That is, the benefits that are valued by each are somehow received or experienced by each. Does that make sense? So if you think about this as a definition of relationship, there's several elements in here. First of all, it's ongoing. Right? There's no end point here. And Chirag has talked before about the infinite game, how it always goes on. Same thing with the relationship. An ongoing willingness to engage. That is, I'm willing to commit something to this relationship over time. And I'm doing so because I expect some kind of a benefit to come to me. But is that benefit always experienced? Who knows, right? That's what we're talking about here. There's a question that relates to this. If we use this as a working definition for today, then it brings up another question, which is simply, on whose terms? Are you running your relationships on whose terms? Let me ask you, how many of you run your marriage to be all about you? If that's you, put a yes in the chat box. How many of you, if you're really being honest, run your marriage to be all about the other? I wish. Got it, Ann. Thank you. Similarly, how many of you have raised a child where it's all about you? Or how many of you have raised a child where it's all about the child? So you can begin to see that we have a certain philosophy about how we relate to others. That is, we bring ourselves to the relationship in a certain way, right? We're getting philosophical here. We bring ourselves to the relationship in a certain way. In certain relationships, it might be, yeah, this relationship is going to be all about me. In other relationships, it might be, it's all about the other. Or maybe I never thought about it before, but now that I'm thinking about it, I realize I've made the relationship all about the other, and that's why I'm miserable, for example. Right? Maybe it's a marriage or long-term relationship of one kind or another. Or maybe you've had that relationship sometime in your life and you took your experience out of that and said, I'm never going to do that again, for example. But to direct this towards business, how many of you may be making some of your business relationships with teammates all about you? Or more importantly, is it possible that one or more of your staff experiences it that way? It's an important consideration because remember, everything in business is about relationship. All you're doing is relating. You're relating with a whole bunch of different types of folks in whatever way seems most sensible to you, but you might not be doing it with clarity and intention. It might just be, well, this is how I relate to people. I never thought about it before. I'll just keep going on, right? You just wake up in the morning, you start opening your emails, and you start answering emails and doing what you do. That's relating, but it's not conscious relating, right? It's unconscious relating. So if I ask you to take 5 minutes to consider right now, is it possible that someone on your team might be experiencing a relationship with you where it's all about you? Does that matter to you? It should. Think about it. You bring somebody on your team. You say, okay, you can be on my team, but you're going to have to live with these splits. All right. I'm going to give you X out of whatever, each deal generates, right? You're going to get that. Then I want you to come onto my team and I want you to show houses like this. And I want you to put everything into the CRM like this. And I want you to show up at all these meetings. And I want you to share information with so-and-so like this. And I want you to do this, that, and the other thing. Here's your, job description. You've given them 101 things to do, which are all the things you want them to do. Nothing wrong with that. That's why they're on the team, to do those things. But is it possible that they're experiencing that as somewhat on your terms rather than theirs? When you think about a relationship, you can think about a sliding scale, if you will. On one side is this relationship's all about person A's terms. On the other end of the scale is it's all about person B's terms. And somewhere there's a sliding thing inside there. Maybe a relationship, a true relationship is about somewhere in the middle. When we mentioned a minute ago about in valued benefits for all, can we say that if you're in a relationship where everything accrues to person A's benefit and nothing to person B's, is that really a relationship? From my point of view, it's not. Theoretically, it might be because two people are connected with each other. But if we define relationship as having valued benefits for all, then it can't be at this end or that end. It has to be somewhere in between. And so I'm asking you to consider wherever you think you are on this scale with any relationship on your team, are you sure the other person's in that same place the way they look at it and experience it? Maybe, maybe not. So how do you know how someone on your team experiences the relationship? And is it any different from the way you experience it? Well, get feedback. Yesterday, Chirag said how important it is to listen to create a great experience for others. And I'm sure you do this with your clients. You're asking them, is there anything else I can do? Is there something else I can do that supports you? I want to make sure that, we're doing everything we can for you. You probably say those things all the time to your clients. But do you say them to your teammates? Anybody know Danny Meyer? Danny Meyer is a very famous restaurateur. He's had a lot of successful restaurants, from Union Square Cafe in New York, really renowned restaurant, to Shake Shack chain, to many others. And he wrote this book called Setting the Table. Interesting book. You might find it interesting if you like learning about how other leaders run their businesses. And he identifies 5 stakeholder groups for all of his businesses: customers, employees, vendors and suppliers, the community at large, and his investors. And that's quite similar to what we have here. We might not have investors like he has in his restaurants, but we have the other 4. Interestingly, which one of those stakeholder groups does he put above all the rest? Most of us might say customers. Customer comes first. Customer is king. We're here for our customers. I love my customers. I'll do anything for my customers. Not him. He's built many successful businesses differently. He sees employees as the #1 stakeholder group. And here's his logic. He says, if you nail the relationships with the employees, if you get that right, and you make that a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, then what you're doing is you're promoting awesome service delivery. That takes care of the customers, the second group. If you're providing awesome customer service delivery, then you start drawing in other vendors and suppliers. And if you maintain relationships with them, you're serving them as well. And so by serving staff, employees, and the vendors, you're providing a great contribution to the community. You're employing people, you're providing taxes, you're offering a wonderful service that's valued by people out there. You're probably doing things for philanthropy or something else related to community. The community benefits. And if all 4 of those things are happening in his case, then obviously the investors, they get a good, successful return on their investment. So the point here is you need to get the relationships right with your staff. It's not all about employees. So how do you do that? Well, you have a conversation to help you understand how your staff are experiencing the relationship. You can do that very simply. I'm going to give you 4 simple questions here that you can use in a conversation that can help you get a good look into how your employee is experiencing working with you and for you and with the rest of the team. You don't have to limit yourself to these 4 questions, but they provide a skeleton for a conversation. Could be a 5-minute conversation, could be a 15-minute conversation, could be an hour-long conversation. I suggested not 5 minutes. I suggest something longer than that. Here are the questions, very simply. What's it like for you to work on this team? A very open-ended question, just to give them a start so that they can give you a certain sense of, like, what's the first thing that comes to my mind? It's great. It's okay. It used to be pretty good. Now it's not so good lately. Whatever answer you get there is a good one. They might not give you an honest one to start off. Hopefully, they're going to be willing to give you some honest feedback. But in any case, it opens up the conversation. What do you like about how the team relates to you? Do you often ask this question? Do you ever ask this question? And third one, what do you wish we would do differently and why? And we're not talking here about how we handle this problem with this client or how we handle that problem with that client. What we're talking about is how we relate with each other, share information, support each other, provide feedback, all the things that are part of the experience of working together with someone else, not necessarily related to one particular deal that's on the table or another. And finally, the most important one here, what would you like me to continue doing? What would you like me to stop doing or start doing? We call this stop, start, continue. It's a really important question. I wonder if you ever asked this one of your staff. What would you like me to stop doing? What would you like me to start doing? What would you like me to continue doing? Or another version of this is do less, do more. Instead of asking those 3 questions, you say, what would you like me to do more of in relating with you? What would you like me to do less of? And crucially, you ask why. Because the why gives you the insight into how their brain processes or makes sense of this. It's not just, I'd like you to do more of this, or I'd like you to do less. I'd like you to do more of this because. And so you can see how a simple conversation like this can be built around 4 easy questions like this. Now, if you're going to have a conversation like this with your employees, you need to make sure that you're setting the stage for them to be open and honest. And if you don't have a strong relationship with somebody, chances are they might be a little suspicious about why you might want to have this conversation with them. They might doubt your intentions to gain an accurate picture of what the relationship is like. And so you'd have to preface it. You'd have to say, look, I'd love to meet with you next week for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is. I want to talk with everybody on the team because it's important to me to understand what your experience is like working here with me and with everybody else in the team. So I'd like to invite you to have an open and honest conversation where I'm here to seek your feedback and input on what it's like for you to be here. Now, hopefully they're willing to engage with you in that conversation. If not, you might have to start with something more simple, just like, not an official conversation, but from time to time, you could just ask your, offhand, hey, how's it going? And maybe they get used to a little questioning like that. And then you can have a kind of a bona fide, intentional conversation like this. But this is one particular task that you could take on between now and next week with any of your staff. There's another one I'll share with you in just a minute. After I'm done with these slides, certainly feel free to ask me any questions about them. So one thing you want to do is you absolutely want to get feedback so that you have a clear understanding of what it's like for other people, how they experience working with you, for you, and with everybody else on the team. This helps you think about how you can build the relationship over time in a way that provides valued benefits for each. It doesn't mean that you take this information and you bend over backwards and you do whatever they want and it's all about them. We're not talking about that. We're talking about being somewhere in the middle of this continuum where the valued benefits for each both happen. So how do you build a relationship over time? Well, there's a lot of things: trust, transparency, authenticity, all those things are important. Maybe there's a simple way for us to have a simple kind of 4-piece skeleton or pillar for how you can think about building relationships with your staff. And I'd like to suggest one here with a simple acronym that might be easy for you to remember, but I don't propose that this is the only way to think about relationship. But if you do want to think about how can I build relationships going forward, you could build it around these 4 things: motivations, expectations, goals, and accountabilities. It makes the acronym MEGA. You can think of how can I have a mega relationship with people on my team. Motivations. This is about understanding why they are here. What is it that in a general sense drives them to doing this work with you as opposed to somewhere else? There's a million things we could spend our time on in our life. Why is it that we generally want to be here? Expectations is about what are their expectations, because whether you've asked them or not, people carry expectations with them into every relationship. Question is, have you asked what they are? Goals, of course, is about specific individual goals that they might have right now, which makes it different from motivations. Motivation is a little bit more general in a sense. Goals might be something like, I'd like to learn a specific skill, or I'd like to gain this specific experience, or right now, I'd like to earn X dollars so I can go out and buy that car, or whatever it is. Those are goals that the person might have at this time. And accountabilities are, how do they see their commitments to the relationship? And it might be quite different from you. I don't know, but that's part of how you align yourself over time, is to understand what the world looks like from their point of view. So this conversation also can be built around 4 questions that each one relates to each of these 4 items you'll see. Building a mega relationship, 4 questions. First one about motivation. Why do you work in this field? What is it that turns you on, that helps you get up in the morning to come in here and do this work? Is it because you want people to have a happy life? Is it because you like being part of a winning team? Is it because you're an empty nester and you've been raising kids for 15 years and the kids just left for college and now you want to dive back into the business world, which you used to do before the kids were born? These are general ideas that may give us a good insight into where the person is coming from. Second, what expectations do you have of me as your partner? An incredibly important question. If you haven't asked this question in a while, or if you've never asked it, find a time to ask it, maybe as part of this conversation or just as a simple one-on-one casually sometime. It's really important for you to understand what their expectations are. It's what they're carrying into the relationship with you every day. And it may or may not make sense to you, and it may or may not be agreeable to you. And some of it may make them, it may cancel their membership. Like, if that's what your expectation is, sorry, I can't do that. We're not a fit for each other. I'll have to say goodbye and go have a happy life. But understanding it is crucial. Third, what goals do you have right now? How clear are you as to what goals that individual working with you and for you has at this particular moment in time? And by the way, while it's on my mind, these questions aren't just for people who are employed by you. They're for people who are agents and even vendors. To be in a relationship with any of these stakeholder groups means having some awareness of how they experience the relationship with you. And finally, what are you willing to be accountable for? What is it that you're willing to commit to here? Now, this 4th question, often the person has a shallow answer to. When you ask this question, you might not get much of an answer back. They might say something very generic like, well, I promise to show up and do the work, or I promise to do my best, or, I'll give everything I have. Okay, that's fine. And as an opening kind of to this kind of exploration with somebody in your relationship, it's fine as a start. But as time goes on, you want to kind of zero in either in the same conversation or perhaps in a later conversation about what does that actually look like? What does that actually mean? And we gave you a tool a couple of weeks ago, which was the role reset worksheet, which you can use for a new employee, or you could use for an employee that you're kind of resetting their relationship or resetting their role. And a couple of things in there were around, what they should be accountable for in this role. And a couple of them are what you're accountable for. And so this conversation around accountability is really important. You need to come to alignment around what it is each of you is accountable for in the relationship. It goes way beyond just splits, right? It goes way beyond just, I'll give you leads once in a while. It's how am I going to show up in the relationship, right? If you need people to show up in the meetings and they're not showing up at the meetings, that's a problem. And I say that because a lot of clients have told me that. A lot of team leaders have said, you know what, I think it's really important for us to meet once a week, but I can't get anybody to do it. So my question to them naturally is, why are they on your team? And so the accountabilities is a dialogue over time to reach an alignment where both of you are saying, yes, we both agree that this is important to business, and therefore we're both going to show up and do the things we need to do to make that business work. So that's the second conversation. So what are steps for you to take action on this week? 2 options for you. First, use the first conversation, getting feedback, or use the second conversation, build a mega relationship. The second conversation can be for somebody who's been on your team for a while, or it can be for somebody who's just coming onto the team brand new. right? You may have just added somebody, or you're thinking of adding somebody. Those questions, that kind of a conversation should be one that you have with that person as soon as possible, before they come on or soon after they come on. And for somebody who's been on the team for a while, obviously the getting feedback conversation is a really useful one. So let me pull this down. We have a couple of minutes. I'm happy to take a couple of questions, but first I have a question for you, which is, which one of these, put into the chat box if you are thinking you might want to have one of these conversations with a staff member, and which conversation are you thinking of having? Please put that in the chat. Feedback. First for employees, great. Start with one employee, Scott. Pick one that you feel comfortable to have the conversation with first. Don't go directly to your most difficult employee to start with it, and kind of get your feet wet with somebody that you think you can have a more collaborative conversation. And one more thing, don't expect everyone to be able to be perfect at having this conversation with you the first time, right? Getting to a real facility and comfort with these kinds of conversations often takes time. Not everybody's just suited for that, like right out of the gate, especially if you've never had this kind of conversation before. But certainly when you start having conversations around things like this, when they start to see how important it is for you to understand what the world looks like from their point of view, it can shift the relationship completely. I see a number of people here trying the mega. So I definitely want to hear back from you how the mega went. So certainly send me an email later if you have a moment and tell me how either of these conversations went at david@chiragshahcoaching.com. We have a couple of minutes left. Who has a question about anything that I said here? And or who kind of sees a barrier for themselves that they'd like to kind of like raise here? Because probably if it's coming up for you, it's probably coming up for somebody else. Nothing. That means either it's perfect, everybody's good, or I totally missed the mark on this conversation, and thinking about relationship is not something that you think matters to you. Best way to start conversation about feedback, I'm worried. Okay, so Anne, for you and for everybody, it's important for you to put the word out there before you have these conversations with anyone. I would suggest you do it in a meeting. And just say something like, use your own words, but something like, hey, everybody, I've been thinking about our teamwork, and teamwork is really important to me. And I want to make sure that I'm providing everything I can so that we can have awesome relationships together. And to that end, I'd like to meet with each of you one-on-one over the next week or so to just ask you a few questions about how you're experiencing working here, what works well for you, what doesn't work well for you, so I can get a better, finger on the pulse of everyone, because I believe that if this place works well for you, it's going to work well for our clients. Is that something you could say? It's not that difficult, but it kind of puts a stake in the ground, right? You're delivering a couple of important messages. One, you're saying your experience here is important to me. That's like message number one. Two, I'm willing to commit time and energy and effort to making sure that that relationship, that experience is a good one for you. And therefore, three, expect me to come and have a conversation with you. And if somebody says, I really don't want to have that conversation, you say, fine, don't have to, right? You don't want to force somebody into something that they're not comfortable with. Hopefully they will be, but if they're not comfortable to have that conversation, that's either evidence that one, you have a very weak relationship with that person, or two, they might not be the right kind of person to have on your team. If you think these kinds of conversations are useful to have once in a while, and that person doesn't want to engage in that way, then it might not be, the right fit. So I hope that works for everybody. Listen, everybody, one final thing. Remember, as I said a minute ago, can't be overemphasized enough. This is not easy stuff. This is not the stuff that most leaders engage in. They're just in the business all day. This is a big difference between leadership and management. It's very easy to manage the business, right? You just got to be in it every day. You got to manage this deal, manage that deal, manage the next deal, keep moving forward day after day after day. But leadership means engaging in a whole bunch of different topics. And at the heart of leadership is relationship, right? You can't have leadership without relationship. You can't have teams without relationship. So if you're going to lead a team, you need to be engaged in growing your relationship clarity, understanding, and skill set. And for other people, it's kind of a new thing. So, no matter how it goes the first time around, All you really want to do is get some useful input. You don't have to force anything on anybody. And you could say something like, you know what, I'd like to have these conversations once every quarter or so. Just want to make sure things are going great for all of you. It's so important to me. I believe our clients benefit when you guys are having a great experience here. And so I'm thinking of having these conversations every 3 months or so, and see what people say. They might say, yeah, that sounds great. Would love to do that. Or they might say, 3 months, can't we talk more often than that? Like once a month? Yeah, we certainly can. And so remember that the conversations are not about dictating terms. They're not about making it about you. It's all about listening and understanding. And then after that, you can reflect on that. So we're going to spend some more time over the next 3 conversations going further into some of these topics. But I hope this gives you guys something to think about as a starting point. I hope you'll go out there and have these conversations with at least one person. You don't have to have them with everybody on your team, but have it with one person you feel comfortable with, and let us know how it works for you. And we'll see you all again here next Wednesday. Have a great day, everybody.